The crowd roared as Marcus Chen stood in the center of the fighting ring. Dust hung in the air around him like a golden cloud. His dark hair stuck to his forehead with sweat, and his breathing was heavy but steady. Around the massive arena, thousands of alien beings cheered and screamed in languages he did not understand. Marcus looked down at the 12 fallen warriors scattered around the ring. Each one came from a different world, each one bigger and stronger than any human should be able to defeat. But here they lay, knocked out or too hurt to continue fighting. The human had won using nothing but his fists, his brain, and moves he learned growing up on Earth. The Nexus Station Arena was the biggest fighting place in this part of the galaxy. Aliens came from hundreds of worlds to watch the grand tournament that happened once every 5 years. No human had ever even made it past the first round before. Most people thought humans were too weak, too slow, too small to compete with the galaxy's best fighters. But Marcus was different. He grew up on a rough colony world where you had to fight to survive. He learned boxing from his father, martial arts from old video files, and street fighting from the gangs that tried to control his neighborhood. When the recruiters came looking for fighters, he volunteered not for glory, but because his colony needed the prize money. Now he stood as champion, and the crowd slowly grew quiet. The noise faded to whispers as 3 tall figures walked into the arena. These were the tournament masters, the ancient beings who ruled Nexus Station and organized the fights. They looked like living crystals shaped like people, their bodies clear and blue and taller than any human. Light moved inside them like slow lightning. The lead tournament master stopped in front of Marcus. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm, somehow both musical and frightening. "Human warrior," it said, and the words echoed around the arena even though it spoke quietly. "You have done what none of your kind has done before. You have won our grand tournament." Marcus said nothing. He kept his hands at his sides and his face calm, even though his heart was beating fast. He had learned long ago that showing weakness was dangerous, especially when dealing with powerful beings who might see you as nothing more than an animal. "As champion," the tournament master continued, "you may claim your prize according to our ancient laws." It gestured with one crystal hand toward the edge of the arena. "Behold your choices." 2 figures were brought forward by guards in dark armor. Both were female aliens, both wearing simple gray clothes, both with heavy metal chains around their wrists and ankles. The chains made soft clinking sounds as they walked. The first was tall and strong-looking, with silver skin that seemed to shine under the arena lights. Her hair was white as snow and hung down to her shoulders. Her eyes were bright gold and full of anger. Even chained, she walked with the proud bearing of a warrior. Marcus could see old scars on her arms and face, marks of many battles. This had to be a Valkyrian, one of the famous warrior women from the Outer Rim worlds. The second alien was smaller and more delicate. Her skin was pale blue and seemed to glow softly from within, like moonlight on water. Her hair was long and dark, and her large eyes were the color of deep ocean water. She moved carefully as if she was afraid of hurting someone just by being near them. Marcus recognized her as an Etherian, one of the peaceful healer people from the core worlds. The tournament master's voice rang out again. "The silver one is Zara of Valkyria Prime. She was a war leader among her people until her world tried to rebel against our rule. We captured her when her fleet was destroyed. She has been waiting 3 years for someone worthy to claim her." Zara's golden eyes blazed with hatred, but she said nothing. Marcus could see that her spirit was not broken, despite years of captivity. She still held her head high like the warrior princess she had been. "The blue one is Lith of Ethereal," the tournament master continued. "Her people are healers and peacemakers. When they could not pay their tribute to us last year, we took her as payment. She has abilities that could serve you well. She can heal wounds and sickness with her touch." Lith kept her eyes down, but Marcus could see her hands shaking slightly. Unlike Zara, she looked terrified. Her people probably had no experience with violence or slavery. Being here must be like a nightmare for someone raised in a peaceful culture. The tournament master spread its crystal arms wide. "These are your choices, human champion. Both are young, both are healthy, both have been trained to serve. You may pick one as your prize and property. Choose wisely, for this choice cannot be undone." The arena fell completely silent. Tens of thousands of aliens waited to see what the human would do. Some had bet money on his choice, Others were just curious to see how a primitive human would handle such an important decision. Marcus looked from Zara to Lith and back again. He thought about his colony back home, where people of different backgrounds worked together to survive. He thought about his sister who had taught him that strength meant protecting those who could not protect themselves. He thought about what his parents had taught him about right and wrong. The tournament master was clearly expecting him to point at one of the women and claim her like a piece of equipment. That was how things worked in this part of the galaxy. The strong took what they wanted from the weak. Slavery was normal here, just another part of doing business, but Marcus was human. And humans had their own ideas about how to treat other thinking beings. He looked directly at the tournament master, his voice clear and steady. "I choose both." The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Then, slowly, whispers began to spread through the crowd like ripples on a pond. The whispers grew louder, turning into confused chatter in dozens of alien languages. The tournament master's crystal body flickered and changed color, shifting from blue to yellow to red. This was clearly not the answer it had expected. The other two tournament masters moved closer, and Marcus could hear them making sounds like breaking glass as they spoke to each other in their own language. Zara looked up sharply, her golden eyes wide with surprise. For the first time since being brought into the arena, she looked directly at Marcus. There was something new in her expression. Not hope exactly, but curiosity. Lith also raised her head, her blue eyes meeting Marcus's for just a moment before she looked away again. But in that brief moment, Marcus saw something that made his chest tight with anger. She looked surprised that anyone would want to help her. The lead tournament master finally stopped flickering and turned back to Marcus. Its voice was colder now, like winter wind through ice caves. "Human, you do not understand our ways. The law is clear, one champion, one prize. You cannot choose both." Marcus crossed his arms and planted his feet wider, taking the same stance he used when facing down bullies back home. "Then your law is wrong," he said simply. "Where I come from, we don't leave people behind when we can save them." The crowd's chatter grew louder. Some aliens were laughing, thinking the human was just being stupid. Others seemed angry that he was challenging the tournament masters. But a few, mostly the smaller, weaker species who often ended up as slaves themselves, were watching with interest. The tournament master's body flashed bright red. "You dare to call our ancient laws wrong? You are nothing but a primitive creature from a backward world." Marcus shrugged. "Maybe, but this primitive creature just beat 12 of your best fighters. So either I'm not as primitive as you think, or your fighters aren't as good as you think. Either way, I'm choosing both of these women." The tournament master was quiet for a long moment. Marcus could almost see it thinking, weighing its options. Finally, it spoke again, and now its voice was smooth and dangerous. "Very well, human. You wish to challenge our laws? Then you will face the consequences. We will give you a chance to win both prizes, if you can survive one more test." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his expression calm.
"What kind of test?"
The tournament master smiled, and the sight was terrifying, like watching a glacier crack. "If you can complete the trial of the labyrinth and return alive, both women will be yours to take. But if you fail," it paused dramatically, "if you fail, you will die, and both women will be given to the runner-up of our tournament. Do you accept these terms?" Marcus didn't need to think about it. He had made his choice the moment he saw the fear in Lith's eyes and the defiant anger in Zara's. "I accept." The tournament master's laughter sounded like breaking crystal. "Excellent. The trial of the labyrinth begins at dawn tomorrow. Rest well tonight, human champion. It may be your last night alive." As the guards led Zara and Lith away, Marcus caught Zara's eye one more time. She nodded slightly, not gratitude but acknowledgement. A warrior recognizing another warrior's choice to fight for what was right, even when the odds were bad. Marcus walked out of the arena to prepare for whatever tomorrow would bring, knowing that he had already won the most important battle, the one to stay true to his human values in a galaxy that had forgotten what those values meant. The moment Marcus accepted the challenge, chaos broke out in the arena. The crowd erupted into a noise louder than a thunderstorm. Some aliens cheered, excited by the promise of more entertainment. Others booed and hissed, angry that their betting plans were now ruined. Arguments started breaking out in the stands as different species shouted at each other in their own languages. The three tournament masters gathered in a tight circle, their crystal bodies flashing different colors as they spoke to each other in rapid musical tones. Marcus could not understand their language, but their body movements showed they were having a heated discussion. One of them kept pointing at him while making sharp, angry sounds. Marcus stood perfectly still in the center of the ring, his arms crossed, waiting for them to finish. He had learned long ago that when powerful people were making decisions about your life, it was best to look calm and confident, even if your stomach was full of butterflies. Finally, the lead tournament master turned back to face him. Its crystal form had settled into a deep purple color, which Marcus guessed meant it was either very serious or very angry. Maybe both. Human, it said, its voice now carrying an edge like broken glass. My colleagues believe you should be punished immediately for your disrespect. They say no primitive being should be allowed to challenge laws that have stood for over 1,000 years. Marcus raised an eyebrow. But you don't agree with them? The tournament master made a sound that might have been laughter, if laughter could sound like wind chimes falling downstairs. I find you interesting. In all the centuries I have overseen these tournaments, no champion has ever made such a request. Most simply point at whichever prize appeals to them most and take their reward like a sensible being. Well, Marcus said with a slight smile, humans aren't known for being sensible. Indeed, the tournament master replied, which is why I'm curious to see how far this lack of sense will take you. The trial of the labyrinth has not been used in over 50 years. The last 3 beings who attempted it died horribly. Marcus felt his mouth go dry, but he kept his voice steady. What exactly is this labyrinth? The tournament master's form shifted to show what looked like scenes moving inside its crystal body. Images of twisting corridors, strange lights and shadows that moved by themselves. The labyrinth of echoing minds, it said, is our ultimate test of mental strength and determination. It was built by our ancestors using technology your species cannot understand. The labyrinth reads your thoughts and uses them against you, the tournament master continued. It will show you your greatest fears, your worst memories, your deepest regrets. It will try to drive you insane with visions of things that could be or should have been. Many beings with far more advanced minds than yours have entered that maze and never come out. Marcus thought about this. It sounded terrifying, but also like something he might be able to handle. Growing up on a frontier colony had given him plenty of practice dealing with fear and bad memories. And if I make it through? If you reach the center of the labyrinth and return with the crystal of truth that lies there, both women will be released into your custody. Not as slaves, but as free companions who may choose to stay with you or go their own way. This was better than Marcus had expected. And if I don't make it? The tournament master's color shifted to a dark red. If you die in the labyrinth, both women will be given to Krog the Destroyer, who came in second place in our tournament. Krog has less gentle ideas about how to treat his prizes. Marcus looked over at where Krog sat in the VIP section of the arena. The massive creature looked like a cross between a rhinoceros and a tank, with thick gray skin covered in battle scars and small red eyes that glowed with mean intelligence. Krog was staring at Zara and Lith with the same look a hungry wolf might give a pair of rabbits. I understand the stakes, Marcus said firmly. When do we do this? The labyrinth must be prepared, the tournament master said. You will face the trial tomorrow at dawn. Until then, you will be given quarters to rest and prepare yourself. I suggest you use the time wisely. It may be the last night you spend alive. As guards came forward to escort Marcus away, he caught sight of Zara and Lith being led in a different direction. Both women looked back at him, Zara with something that might have been respect, and Lith with what looked like gratitude mixed with worry. Marcus was taken to a small but comfortable room in the station's guest quarters. It had a bed, a desk, a bathroom, and a window that showed the stars outside. He sat on the bed and tried to think through what he was facing. The labyrinth sounded like some kind of advanced virtual reality system, one that could read minds and create illusions. But Marcus had an advantage that the tournament masters might not know about. He had grown up with nightmares. When Marcus was 12, raiders had attacked his colony. His family hid in their basement for 3 days while the fighting went on above them. He had heard screams, explosions, and the sound of buildings burning. Even after the Colonial Defense Force drove the raiders away, Marcus had bad dreams for years. But dealing with those nightmares had taught him something important. The best way to handle scary thoughts was not to fight them, but to recognize them for what they were and let them pass by like clouds in the sky. You could not stop the scary thoughts from coming, but you could choose how much power you gave them. Marcus spent the evening doing exercises his father had taught him, push-ups, sit-ups, and meditation techniques that helped calm the mind. He also thought about Zara and Lith, and what they must be going through right now. Zara was a warrior, so she probably understood that sometimes you had to take big risks to win important victories. But she might also think Marcus was being foolish, that he should have just chosen one of them and been satisfied with that. Lith was harder to figure out. Her people were healers and peacemakers, so the whole idea of solving problems through violence was probably strange to her. She might not understand why Marcus was willing to risk his life for two people he had never met before, but that was the thing about being human. Sometimes you did not need to understand something to know it was right. Marcus had grown up believing that if you had the power to help someone, and you chose not to use it, you were just as responsible for their suffering as the person causing it. A soft chime from the door interrupted his thoughts. Marcus opened it to find a small alien with blue-green skin and large dark eyes. The creature looked nervous but determined. "Excuse me, Champion Marcus," the alien said in accented but clear English. "My name is Pip. I work in the station's information systems. I wanted to thank you for what you are doing." Marcus stepped aside to let Pip enter. "Thank me? Why?" Pip's large eyes seemed to glow with emotion. "Because someone is finally standing up to the tournament masters. My sister was taken as a prize 3 tournaments ago. The winner was not kind to her. She died 2 years later." Marcus felt a heavy weight settle in his stomach. "I'm sorry. That should never happen to anyone." "That is why I am here," Pip said, pulling out a small device that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a flashlight. "This is a neural stabilizer. It will not help you solve the labyrinth, but it might help you keep your sanity while you are inside it." Marcus took the device carefully. "Won't you get in trouble for helping me?" Pip smiled sadly. "Probably. But some things are worth the risk. Good luck tomorrow, Champion Marcus. Many beings will be hoping you succeed." After Pip left, Marcus examined the neural stabilizer. It was small enough to hide in his pocket, and it seemed to generate some kind of calming energy field when he turned it on. He decided to keep it, though he hoped he would not need it. As the station's lights dimmed to simulate nighttime, Marcus lay down on the bed and tried to get some sleep. Tomorrow would bring the greatest challenge of his life, a test that had killed beings far more advanced than any human. But as he drifted off to sleep, Marcus felt strangely calm. He had made his choice, and he would face the consequences. That was what humans did. They chose what was right instead of what was easy. Even when the odds were against them, in a few hours, he would find out if being human was enough to survive the labyrinth of echoing minds. Dawn came too quickly. Marcus woke to the sound of his door chiming and found 2 guards waiting to escort him to the labyrinth. They were both tall, gray-skinned aliens with no visible weapons. Apparently, they did not think one human was much of a threat. The labyrinth was located in the deepest part of Nexus Station, far below the fighting arenas and shopping districts. As they walked through corridors that grew steadily more ancient-looking, Marcus noticed that the walls changed from metal to some kind of crystal material that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. "How old is this place?" Marcus asked one of the guards. The guard glanced at him with surprise, as if he had not expected the human to speak. "The labyrinth is older than recorded history," he said in a voice like gravel. "It was here when the tournament masters first claimed this station. Some say it was built by the race that came before them. What happened to the race that built it?" The guard was quiet for a moment. "No one knows. They disappeared long ago, leaving only their machines behind." This was interesting information, but Marcus did not have time to think about it much because they had arrived at their destination. The entrance to the labyrinth was a massive circular doorway carved from what looked like a single piece of black crystal. Strange symbols were etched around the edges, symbols that seemed to shift and change when Marcus was not looking directly at them. A crowd had gathered to watch the trial. The tournament masters stood on a raised platform overlooking the entrance, their crystal bodies bright in the dim light. Marcus could see Zara and Lith standing nearby, still chained but now wearing different clothes, simple white robes that made them look like prisoners waiting for execution. When Zara saw Marcus, she stood straighter and gave him a small nod. Her golden eyes were serious but not afraid. She understood what he was risking for her and Lith, and her warrior's pride respected his choice even if she thought it was crazy. Lith looked pale and worried. Her blue skin seemed to glow brighter than usual, which Marcus guessed meant she was scared. When their eyes met, she mouthed the words, "Thank you," so quietly that only he could see. The lead tournament master raised one crystal arm for silence. "Human champion," its voice echoed in the chamber. "You stand before the labyrinth of echoing minds. This ancient test has claimed the lives of many beings far more advanced than your species. Are you certain you wish to proceed?" Marcus looked around at the assembled crowd, aliens from dozens of different worlds, all watching to see what the primitive human would do. Some looked excited, others bored. A few seemed genuinely worried for his safety. But it was the sight of Zara and Lith that made his decision final. "I'm certain," Marcus said loudly enough for everyone to hear. The tournament master made a gesture, and the crystal doorway began to glow. Slowly, like water draining from a bathtub, the black surface became transparent and then disappeared entirely, revealing a corridor that stretched away into darkness. "The rules are simple," the tournament master explained. "Find your way to the center of the labyrinth and retrieve the crystal of truth. Return here with the crystal and you win. The labyrinth will try to stop you using illusions, fears, and false memories. Many challengers become lost in visions of things that never were and never could be." Marcus nodded and stepped toward the entrance. The air around the doorway felt cold and seemed to hum with energy. He could feel the neural stabilizer that Pip had given him, a small weight in his pocket that he hoped would help keep his mind clear. "One last thing. Human," the tournament master called out just as Marcus reached the threshold. "Time moves differently inside the labyrinth. You may experience days or weeks while only hours pass in the real world. Do not let this confuse you. Your goal remains the same." Marcus took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness. Immediately, the world around him changed. The crystal corridor vanished, replaced by a dirt road under a gray sky. Marcus found himself standing in a place he recognized, the main street of his home colony, but not as it looked now. This was how it had looked 12 years ago, before the raider attack that had changed everything. The buildings were intact, the windows unbroken, the gardens green and well-tended. People walked the streets, colonists Marcus remembered, including some who had died in the attack. They all looked exactly as they had in his memories, down to the clothes they wore and the way they moved. "Marcus," a familiar voice called out. He turned to see his younger sister Sarah running toward him, her blonde hair bouncing as she moved. She looked exactly 12 years old, the age she had been when the raiders came. Marcus felt his heart clench with pain and longing. Sarah had survived the raider attack, but she had died 3 years later in a mining accident. He had not seen her face in years except in old photographs. "Sarah," he whispered, and almost took a step toward her before catching himself. This was not real. This was the labyrinth showing him things that could not be. A world where the raiders had never come, where his sister had never died, where his family was still whole. "Why did you leave us, Marcus?" "Oh," Sarah asked, her young voice full of hurt and confusion. "Why did you go away to fight in stupid alien tournaments when we needed you here?" The accusation hit Marcus like a punch to the gut, because part of him had always wondered the same thing. Had he come to the tournament for the prize money his colony needed, or had he come because he wanted to escape the painful memories of home? "You could have stayed," Sarah continued, her image becoming more solid and real-looking. "You could have helped us rebuild. Instead, you ran away to play with aliens and left us to struggle alone." Marcus closed his eyes and forced himself to remember what the tournament master had said. The labyrinth would show him visions of things that never were and never could be. Sarah was dead, had been dead for years. This was just his guilt and regret given form by alien technology. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said quietly, opening his eyes to look at his sister's accusing face. "But you're not real, and I have work to do." The illusion of Sarah flickered like a broken hologram and then faded away. The entire colony scene began to dissolve around the edges, revealing the crystal walls of the labyrinth underneath. Marcus started walking forward, following a path that seemed to lead deeper into the maze. As he walked, the walls around him showed new scenes, other memories, other regrets. He saw himself as a young man, making decisions that had led to people getting hurt. He saw battles he had fought, mistakes he had made, friends he had failed to save. But Marcus had learned long ago that dwelling on past mistakes was a luxury he could not afford. The past was gone, and the only thing that mattered was what he did next. He kept walking, ignoring the visions that tried to distract him. The labyrinth seemed to sense that its first strategy was not working, because the attacks became more direct. The walls began showing him visions of Zara and Lith being tortured by Krog the Destroyer. He saw them begging for help that would never come, calling his name as they suffered. These visions were harder to ignore because they could actually happen if he failed. But Marcus forced himself to remember that the best way to help Zara and Lith was to stay focused on his goal, not to get lost in fears about what might go wrong. He kept walking, and slowly began to notice something interesting. The labyrinth was not just a random maze, and there was a pattern to it. The walls were arranged in geometric shapes that followed mathematical rules. If he could figure out the pattern, he might be able to navigate more efficiently. Marcus had always been good with numbers and patterns. It was one of the skills that had made him a successful fighter. He could read his opponent's movements and predict their next attacks. Now he applied the same analytical thinking to the labyrinth itself. As he studied the walls and corridors, Marcus began to realize something strange. The labyrinth was not trying to keep him out. It was trying to keep something in. The patterns in the walls were not just decorative. They were some kind of containment system, like a cage made of energy and crystal. What was the labyrinth trying to contain? And why did the tournament masters really want him to go to the center? Marcus had a growing suspicion that there was more to this trial than they had told him. But he kept moving forward, step by step, toward whatever waited for him in the heart of the maze. Behind him, in the viewing chamber, Zara and Lith watched through crystal screens and hoped that the strange human who had chosen to risk everything for them would somehow find a way to succeed. Marcus had been walking through the labyrinth for what felt like hours when he finally reached the center. The geometric patterns in the walls had become clearer as he moved deeper, and by following them like a map, he had been able to avoid most of the maze's dead ends and traps. The center of the labyrinth was a large circular room with a high domed ceiling. The walls were made of the same crystal material as the rest of the maze, but here they glowed with a soft, pulsing light that reminded Marcus of a heartbeat. In the very center of the room stood a small pedestal, and on top of the pedestal sat a crystal about the size of a baseball. But as Marcus approached the crystal, he realized he was not alone in the room. Floating in the air around the pedestal were dozens of ghostly figures, transparent beings that looked like they were made of light and shadow. They moved slowly as if they were swimming through thick water, and their faces showed expressions of terrible sadness and longing. "Who are you?" Marcus asked quietly. One of the figures turned toward him, and Marcus could see that it had once been a tall, elegant being with 4 arms and large dark eyes. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind through empty buildings. "We are the ancients," the figure said. "We are the ones who built this station long ago, before the crystal beings came and made us prisoners in our own creation." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "You're the race that disappeared. The tournament masters. They didn't just find this place, did they? They conquered it." "Yes," another spirit replied, this one looking like it had been a small furred creature with wise eyes. "We were a peaceful people, builders and artists and philosophers. When the tournament masters arrived with their war fleets, we tried to negotiate. We offered to share our technology, our knowledge, our culture. What happened?" Marcus asked, though he was starting to guess the answer. The first spirit's form flickered with what looked like anger. "They enslaved us. They used our own technology to trap our minds and spirits in this labyrinth, turning us into a power source for their station. For thousands of years, our consciousness has been used to fuel their empire." Marcus looked around at the dozens of trapped spirits floating in the air and felt a deep anger building in his chest. This was why the labyrinth could read minds and create illusions. It was powered by the enslaved consciousness of an entire civilization. "The crystal you seek," the small furred spirit said, "is not just a prize to be won. It is the control matrix that maintains our prison. If you take it and leave, we will remain trapped forever. But if you destroy it," the tall spirit added, "we will be free, but the labyrinth will collapse. You may not survive the destruction, Marcus stared at the crystal, his mind racing. The tournament masters had not told him any of this. They had sent him in here expecting him to either die or return with the crystal, never knowing that he would discover their greatest secret. "How many of you are trapped here?" he asked. "Millions," the tall spirit replied sadly. "Every member of our race who was alive when the conquest happened. Our children, our elders, our artists and scientists. All of us imprisoned to power the tournament masters' machines." Marcus thought about Zara and Lith, waiting in the viewing chamber for him to return. If he took the crystal, they would be freed, but millions of innocent beings would remain enslaved. If he destroyed the crystal, he might save the ancients but doom himself and the 2 women he had promised to help. It was exactly the kind of impossible choice that humans faced all the time. The choice between doing what was safe and doing what was right. Is there another way? Marcus asked. Can the crystal be modified instead of destroyed? The spirits looked at each other with surprise. "You would risk your life to help us?" the small spirit asked. "We are strangers to you and we have been dead for thousands of years," Marcus shrugged. "Where I come from, being dead doesn't mean you stop mattering, and being strangers doesn't mean I can ignore your suffering." The tall spirit moved closer, its ghostly form brightening with what might have been hope. "There is a way, but it is dangerous. The crystal's matrix can be overloaded, causing a cascade failure that will free us gradually rather than all at once. But you would need to stay here and manually control the process." "How long would that take?" "Hours in real time. Days or weeks as you experience it inside the labyrinth." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he pulled the neural stabilizer that Pip had given him from his pocket. What if we had help from the outside? The spirits gathered around to examine the device. "This is Nexari technology," the small spirit said with excitement. "If someone on the outside could use this to boost our signal, we might be able to coordinate the release more safely." "But who would help us?" the tall spirit asked. "The tournament masters control everything on this station." Marcus smiled grimly. "You'd be surprised how many people are tired of being pushed around by bullies." Back in the viewing chamber, Zara and Lith watched the crystal screens that showed Marcus standing in the center of the labyrinth. To them, it looked like he was talking to empty air and staring at the crystal without moving to take it. "What is he doing?" Lith whispered to Zara. Zara's warrior instincts told her that Marcus had discovered something important. "He's learning something the tournament masters didn't expect him to learn." As they watched, Lith began to feel something strange. Her empathic abilities, which she had been trying to keep hidden from their captors, were picking up emotional resonances from the labyrinth itself. There were minds in there, many minds, all of them trapped and suffering. "Zara," Lith said quietly, "I think there are people trapped in that maze." "Lots of people." Zara looked at her sharply. "Are you certain?" Lith nodded, her blue skin glowing brighter as she concentrated. "I can feel their pain. They've been there for a very long time." Zara began to understand. Marcus had not just discovered the crystal. He had discovered the true nature of the labyrinth. And knowing Marcus, he would not be content to simply take his prize and leave while others suffered. "The guards aren't paying much attention to us," Zara whispered. "Can you do anything about these chains?" Lith looked down at the metal restraints around her wrists. "I'm a healer, not a lockpick. But can you heal metal fatigue?" Zara asked with a slight smile. "Make the chains weak enough to break?" Lith's eyes widened as she understood. "That's not what my abilities were designed for, but it might work." As Lith began to carefully use her healing powers in reverse, causing tiny cracks to spread through the metal of their chains, Zara started planning their next move. Marcus was risking everything to save not just them, but beings they had never met. The least they could do was make sure he had help when he needed it most. Marcus placed his hands on the control crystal and felt the ancient technology respond to his touch. The crystal was warm and seemed to pulse with its own life. Through it, he could sense the millions of trapped minds in the labyrinth, all waiting for freedom after thousands of years of enslavement. "I need to start the overload process," Marcus told the spirit of the tall ancient. "But first, can you help me send a message to my friends outside?" The ancient nodded and touched the crystal. Immediately, Marcus felt his consciousness expand beyond the labyrinth. reaching out through the station's crystal networks to find Zara and Lith. In the viewing chamber, Lith suddenly gasped as she felt Marcus's mind touch hers. The sensation was gentle but urgent, like someone tapping on her shoulder to get her attention. "Can you hear me?" Marcus's voice whispered in her thoughts. "Marcus," Lith responded silently. "We can feel the trapped minds too. What do you need us to do?" "I'm going to overload the crystal matrix to free the ancients, but it's going to cause chaos throughout the station. Can you get to the main power control room?" Zara, who could not hear the mental conversation but could tell something was happening, whispered urgently to Lith. "What's going on?" Lith quickly explained what Marcus had told her. Zara's eyes lit up with understanding and approval. "A jailbreak. I like it. Our chains are almost weak enough to break," Zara reported through Lith. "Give us 2 minutes and we'll be free." Marcus felt a surge of admiration for both women. Zara was thinking like a soldier, ready to fight for freedom. Lith was using her gentle healing powers in ways her people had probably never imagined. Together they made a formidable team. "There's more," Marcus continued through the mental link. "The tournament masters have been using slave labor and stolen technology to build their empire. When the ancients are freed, they'll be able to testify about what really happened here." In the viewing chamber, Lith felt the last of her chain's structural integrity give way under her careful application of reverse healing. She and Zara exchanged a look, and then both women stood up and snapped their weakened restraints. The guard spun around in surprise, but Zara was already moving. Despite years of captivity, her warrior training came flooding back. She grabbed the first guard's weapon and knocked him unconscious with one smooth motion. The second guard reached for an alarm, but Lith touched his arm and used her abilities to put him into a deep, peaceful sleep. "Where's the power control room?" Zara asked, shouldering the guard's energy rifle. Lith closed her eyes and extended her empathic senses. "That way," she said, pointing down a corridor. "I can feel the technicians' minds. They're worried about power fluctuations." As they hurried through the station's corridors, they began to see signs that something unusual was happening. Lights flickered, computer screens showed error messages, and aliens hurried past looking confused and worried. Back in the labyrinth, Marcus had begun the delicate process of overloading the crystal matrix. Working with the ancient spirits, he carefully introduced feedback loops into the system. Not enough to cause an explosion, but enough to gradually weaken the bonds that held the trapped minds. "It's working," the tall ancient spirit said with amazement. "I can feel our people beginning to wake up after so many centuries of forced sleep." But the process was not going unnoticed. In the Tournament Masters Control Center, alarms began blaring as their instruments detected the changes in the labyrinth. "The human is sabotaging the matrix," one of the Tournament Masters shrieked, its crystal body flashing angry red. "If he destroys it, we'll lose our primary power source. Send security forces to stop him," ordered the lead Tournament Master. "And seal the labyrinth. If we cannot stop the overload, at least we can ensure it destroys him with it." Zara and Lith reached the power control room just as the Tournament Master's security forces were mobilizing. Through the door's window, they could see technicians frantically working at control panels, trying to stabilize systems that were failing throughout the station. "There are 12 technicians in there," Lith reported after extending her senses. "Most of them are scared, not hostile. I think they're just trying to keep the station from falling apart." Zara nodded and walked through the door with her hands raised, showing she was not immediately threatening. "Attention, everyone," she called out in a clear, commanding voice. "I am Zara of Valkyria Prime, and I need your help." The technicians turned to stare at her in shock. Most of them were from smaller alien species that the Tournament Masters considered lesser races, beings who worked for the Crystal Overlords because they had no other choice. "The Tournament Masters have been lying to all of us," Zara continued. "The labyrinth isn't just a test, it's a prison holding millions of innocent minds. Right now someone is trying to free them, but he needs our help to do it safely." One of the technicians, a small blue alien with large eyes, stepped forward nervously. "Lady Zara, if what you say is true, freeing those minds could cause a cascade failure. The entire station could lose power." "Then help us make sure that doesn't happen," Lith said gently, entering the room behind Zara. Her empathic abilities let her sense the technicians' fears and hopes. You all became engineers because you wanted to build things to help people. Here's your chance to help millions of people who have been suffering for thousands of years." The technicians looked at each other uncertainly. Then the small blue alien made a decision. "What do you need us to do?" Working together, Zara, Lith, and the technicians managed to reroute power systems throughout the station, creating a safety net that would prevent a complete collapse when the labyrinth's matrix finally overloaded. It was delicate work that required all of their different skills: Zara's strategic thinking, Lith's ability to sense the emotional resonance of the trapped minds, and the technician's knowledge of the station's systems. In the labyrinth, Marcus felt the changes immediately. "They did it," he told the ancient spirits. "The power grid is stable. We can complete the liberation safely." Together, Marcus and the ancients triggered the final overload. The crystal matrix exploded in a burst of pure light that filled the entire labyrinth. But instead of destruction, the light brought freedom. One by one, the trapped minds of the ancient civilization were released from their crystalline prison. The effect spread throughout Nexus Station like a wave. Every system that had been powered by enslaved consciousness suddenly went dark. The tournament masters' control over their empire began to crumble, as the truth of their crimes was revealed by millions of newly freed witnesses. When the light faded, Marcus found himself standing in a very different labyrinth. The crystal walls had become transparent, showing the vast space beyond where the spirits of the ancients were finally free to move and speak and exist as they chose. "Thank you, human," the tall ancient spirit said, its form now bright and clear instead of dim and trapped. "You have given us the greatest gift possible, the chance to exist as ourselves again." "What will you do now?" Marcus asked. "We will bear witness," the small ancient replied. "We will tell the galaxy what the tournament masters did, and we will make sure it never happens again. And we will help you rebuild this station as a place of freedom instead of oppression." Marcus smiled and walked out of the labyrinth to find Zara and Lith waiting for him, along with dozens of other beings who had been prisoners or slaves on the station. Word of the liberation had spread quickly, and beings were choosing freedom over fear. The tournament masters had fled in their ships, taking what resources they could carry but leaving behind their empire and their crimes. In their place, a new kind of society was beginning to form, one based on cooperation rather than domination. "So," Zara said with a warrior's grin, "what do we do now?" Marcus looked around at the diverse group of beings who had come together to fight for freedom. There was work to be done. The station needed to be rebuilt. The freed prisoners needed help finding new homes, and someone had to make sure the tournament masters faced justice for their crimes. "We build something better," Marcus said simply. Together, over the following months, the former Nexus Station was transformed into something unprecedented in that part of the galaxy. A free port where beings from all species could come to trade, learn, and live in peace. Marcus, Zara, and Lith worked as equal partners in this effort, their different skills and backgrounds, making them an effective leadership team. Zara used her strategic mind and warriors' training to organize defenses against those who would try to restore the old system of oppression. Lith used her healing abilities and empathic gifts to help traumatized beings recover from their experiences under the tournament master's rule. And Marcus used his human stubbornness and problem-solving skills to figure out how to make different species work together despite their many differences. The relationship between the three of them grew stronger as they worked together. What had started as a desperate rescue mission became a deep friendship, built on mutual respect and shared values. Marcus had chosen both women not as prizes to be won, but as partners to share in building a better future. And when news of their success spread to other parts of the galaxy, more beings came to join them. Refugees from other oppressive systems,